It took me 4 days to hitchhike from Sagawa, or something. Oh my, what have I got myself into? Okay. So today we will be working on a Pioneer digital timer model PP-215A. It is mostly identical to the Pioneer PP-215, however this one has a larger clock assembly, so its digits are slightly larger, and all these knobs are not interchangeable because they all reach at different lengths into the unit. So if you used the PP-215s in this one, they would stick out slightly. If you used these on the PP-215, they would not reach into the mechanism and actually engage with the gears. So the object of today will be to clean up the faceplate, relubricate the motor after cleaning, and to clean up this window here because it is covered in something on the inside. Let's see. So, again, it's mostly identical to the PP-215 inside. Motor's the same. Although the plastic piece up here with this floating here, it doesn't do anything on this model at least, is actually made of mostly metal in the PP-215. So, to disassemble it further, we're going to remove the neon bulb here that lights up whenever the plug is active. Just going to wiggle it back and forth. There we go. Got the glue to separate. And then we'll be removing these knobs. Okay. And to get the clock mechanism out, we'd have to do these two screws down here. One thing I've noticed is that on this model, sometimes these screws are black, sometimes they're gold, even on the same exact model. Not sure if those are earlier production runs, but something to keep note of. And there's also going to be two tiny washers here and here that like to break free, but we'll be dealing with those later, so make sure you don't lose those washers. Oh. There we are. They mainly space apart the clock mechanism from the bottom of the unit to center the digits in the window. Normally the front plate of plexiglass, or lucite, whatever you want to call it, comes out easier. So what I'm going to do is nudge it with a pencil from behind. Careful to avoid the digits. So I have a good angle from down here. There we go. No, it's not falling out either. Surprising. Well, it's good we run into issues on the one that I try to take apart, because hopefully if you run into any issues, you'll encounter the same ones. Just trying to think of the best way to get this out of here. I think I had this happened once before, and I tried using a razor blade. Yep, there we go. The glue is giving way. So I just put it inside the gap in the very bottom between the plexiglass and the black think that's ABS plastic frame. One thing I should say as a disclaimer is to always wear safety glasses when dealing with something like this where you're prying a tiny tip under something small. Something in there. So the tip may completely break free and fly up into your eyes, which is not good. There we go. Okay, so that's off, and this stuff on the back is, I've seen it on almost all of the clocks like this, is some sort of emissions. I think it might be a passing car. I think it might be from the neon bulb, perhaps some soot produced by some sort of ionization, producing ozone. I don't know. I'm not an expert in atmospherics, but yeah, it comes right off. So I'll put that aside for now. So, time to actually start cleaning this up. At least the front. The back is not useful to clean up because we're going to use alcohol and some lubricant on this motor back here. Just going to try and get some of this glue off for later. Oh yeah, that sounds amazing, doesn't it? Nice high-pitched squeaking. You don't have to get all of it off because it's like the original glue is going to be hidden behind the smaller window here. But it'll help when you use super glue or Plasti-Weld or something else. Help that adhere and not go everywhere. It's not for a first pass. So, onto the motor. Now, even though this is a Japanese unit, for some godforsaken reason, it uses standard dimension sockets. Well, not sockets, nuts. I believe it was 7/32 of an inch. Oh, that was a nice little ping. Yep, 7/32 is what it fits it. Unless it's some fraction of a millimeter I don't have. And some of these will have tiny little lock washers on these nuts. Some won't. Again, I'm sure that's up to production run. The second nut on the bottom. Careful of the little wires that supply power to the neon bulb. And there's a tiny little thin aluminum. It's too shiny to be tin. Tiny little aluminum cover there for the motor. So, I was reviewing the footage, and as you can tell, I lost most of the motor repair or motor restoration. So, I'll have to recapture some of it. Now, before we get on to restoration, a couple interesting things about this motor to note are that this gear is usually machined with brass. Some unidentifiable plastic right now. Not sure what it is. I don't have any samples of different types of plastic tested against, like you might see on Big Clive or something. It is a dual mode motor, so it has 60 and 50 hertz. And most of these came preset to one or the other. Well, they all came preset to one or the other, but they'll come set to whatever the sticker is. So, this is a Corpal 2 motor made in Japan. And And it has these little holes around the perimeter. And the important thing about these is that's what we're going to be dripping our alcohol and our lubricant through. And you can use most eyelet droppers and such for that. But I use these industrial syringes. Now, these are completely blunt. You'd have to push pretty hard to get these through your skin. But they are still pointy objects, so be careful. And it says for industrial use only on them. They are 1 milliliter capacity, and I'll include an Amazon link, non-affiliated, of course, in the description. And I'm able to reuse the ones I use for the alcohol I use to clean these, but some things like the oil I use just break down the rubber, so I had to throw it out. Now, when you're cleaning this, what you're going to want to do is to push alcohol down the back side of this cap here. So you don't want to coat the internals of the motor in alcohol and oil. You want to drip it down the back here. So I usually put the tip just beyond it, hold it a bit on this side, and push it through. And I'll usually rotate it every once in a while because stuff will fall past the central axle, and then rotating it 180 degrees will allow that to fall back across the axle before flicking it back and forth. And the alcohol, I usually put about 1 milliliter through there. Although you can use more if you think you're not getting enough progress on freeing up the motor. Although, of course, that takes longer to dry. And then the oil, which is just Singer standard sewing machine oil, I usually put about 0.3 of a milliliter down through it. Again, being very careful to drip it down the back part of this component, letting the oil flow down over the axle. And if anything starts pooling down here on the other side of this cap, I'll again rotate it 180 degrees to let it fall on there. And rotating it both directions in order to help it travel along the axle. And you can definitely tell the motor becomes freed up as you expose the axle to alcohol. Flicking it back and forth will become much easier as you continue, although part of that is, of course, the alcohol lubricating it. But once you've let the alcohol dry, you should still feel a difference between where you first started and how easy it is to turn the motor. Of course, lubricating it, you can use most light oils. I use sewing machine oil. Some people like to go really light and use diesel fuel, although it's highly volatile, so, in the actual meaning of volatile, so I don't tend to use those. And then, of course, once you have the motor cleaned, you're going to want to mesh it back with those gears gently. And always make sure that you haven't bumped this switch here. There we go. Being careful to grab this cap. And then the two nuts that are holding this in place. Which are somewhere in this dish I have in here. Oh, there it is. It's hiding underneath one of the screws. Okay, I'm going to come back now in post to quickly talk about how I clean the unit. That was another section that got overwritten in my camera. For the black metal sides, top and back, I used just a alcohol moistened rag. For the plexiglass, I used some dish soap on a kitchen sponge, although it's important to make sure the sponge doesn't have anything on it that could scratch up the plexiglass. And finally, for the aluminum faceplate, I used the liquid form of Barkeeper's Friend. It is in a gold bottle. I find that the granular form of Barkeeper's Friend is simply too rough to use on faceplates like these, and can wear away the lettering, so I would definitely use the liquid form, although you should still be careful about possibly damaging the lettering if you rub too hard. So definitely go softly and slowly until you just clean off all the golden patina from stuff like oils from hands and soot over the years. Of course, there will also be some light oxidation present as well, and you might have to rub a bit harder to remove that, but dry spot, clean it, and rub lightly in and around lettering. And again, just go slow and steady. So we are back with a cleaned up aluminum faceplate. That golden patina is gone. Sorry, purists. Also have a more or less crystal clear plexiglass panel. Cleaned up metal housing. And lastly, we just have the window itself. So I'm going to unplug this. And then I need some Q-tips. Okay. Right now I'm cleaning up the center lip that actually is visible. Just most of the dust and grime off from years of appears to be soot. And then one more pass for the outer area. All of its glue. And normally there won't be nearly as much glue on this, but again, for some reason, this time around it had the most glue I've ever seen. So, now the next step is not difficult, but a little finicky and requires a tiny amount of finesse. The reason for that is reattaching this. Now, you could just set it in there and hope maybe time bit hot glue holds it in place while you put it into the unit, but I like to actually fix it back in place with new glue. And to do that without emissions and fumes fogging up the view, like from cyanoacrylate or related adhesives such as super glue, you could use a fume hood like I have, but if you don't have a fume hood, I would, or just maybe even a fan just to push air through it to prevent fumes from building up. I would recommend using something like maybe a tiny dab of epoxy or another fast drying, low odor, low emissions adhesive. And you know what, I actually will use my fan instead of the fume hood, since again, not many people have access to a fume hood. To do this, I'm not going to drip glue directly on there for two reasons. Number one, you're probably going to get too much. I'm going to turn off the fan until I actually need it. And two, if you do too much, or just you do enough and it runs in an unfortunate way, it'll not only get in the areas where it'll be visible, but it could also get into the mechanism itself and just completely ruin it. So, I'm going to do this over this cloth. I'm going to super glue on the tip of this Q-tip. Use that to lightly paint the areas in the corner. Make sure the other side's clean, obviously, before you do this. force it into its little groove there. It's flat, and there we go. Let's prevent fumes from building up in there and clouding it. So I waited for the glue to set, and while I was waiting, I gave a quick clean to the elements that will be visible from the front. The other little bits and bobs won't be visible from the front, although these will be visible from the sides if you want to repaint them or clean them from oxidation. So I used alcohol and everything except for these. I used just a bit of Barkeeper's Friend again, and then gave them a rinse in the sink. These I've seen heavily oxidized in the past, but these were actually rather clean before I did it. Okay, so that's attached. We have to move on to... No, actually, yeah. To move on to reassembly. So one thing you don't want to forget are these... These two tiny washers. So these help, again, to center it, although it's not very important. It's half a millimeter. So raise it by half a millimeter, so that matters to you. I've always put these back in, though, so the easiest way to keep these in is to grab a piece of Scotch tape. Pick up in the middle. And then just tape it over the hole it goes over. There we go. Like so. Now, before this part goes underneath the front lip here, I'm going to give it a quick pass of some alcohol. Grab my two little screws, start them off, down through those holes and down through the washers. And I am going to make sure that it is slid all the way up on both sides. You see it wants to go that way on one side, and actually both sides. All the way up against the black metal front lip. Hold it in place. There we go. And then the last thing to clean is a little on-off toggle there. Now, reassembling the rest of it is kind of tricky, because if you assemble it really any other way than the way I'm about to show you, it'd be difficult to either get the whole thing lined up when it's like this, or you'll forget, or you can't get this really into position beforehand. So place this first. Can't really prop that up. And if you're going to be using one of these things, oh, bloody hell. In the right? No, it's not. There we go. If you're going to be using one of these things, I highly recommend you use one with an adjustable transmission to make sure you're using the minimum amount of pressure necessary. Okay. Then we're going to reattach the little neon bulb here, and quickly plug in to make sure that still works, because we moved a lot of things around in there. Yep, both neon bulbs are still going. So the next thing you want to reattach is the top panel. I should probably put these back in the little bowl, or actually, yeah, back in the bowl for now. There we go. Okay, and then front one's on. Note that there's a metal ring clip around these on the 215 model because it's longer, and those can be a little difficult to get on, so just be careful not to snap the plastic when you're pushing those on. Okay, and then lastly, we have the sides. And we're done. Completely working. And for the most part, completely clean too. Of course, the real important step is to then grab a box, wrap it in bubble wrap, put it in here, and throw it on eBay.